is you have to accept whatever circumstance you're in and never play the victim. So you're never a victim. I have I don't know, maybe a mental thing that I do is that regardless of the circumstance or the adversity that I'm going through, I always think, what would that line look like that would be behind me that would want to take my place? And at my lowest low, at the times when you think it cannot possibly get worse than this, I know that line is so long, I would never be able to see the end of it. So, that mental framework just always makes me think I'm not a victim, and I need to own whatever I'm in.
This is the Own It Show, where we tell stories of how everyday people made ownership theirs.
Welcome back to the Own It Show. I'm your host, Justin Rothling-Schofer, and if you're new here, welcome. It is so great to have you. It is so great that you've decided to step into something unique, something different, because we know that when you step into something different, your outcomes are also going to be different. Again, if it is your first time, be sure, leave a review. Write something down. If it's impacted you, share it, because that's the only way that we touch the people in our mission to ultimately redeem the health of the world and to help people live life differently. There's over 300 different episodes in the past few years that we've been doing this. And whether it's just me talking or whether it's some of the amazing guests that I've had on, I would love to hear your feedback and love for you to continue to put the word out to make the Own It Show something that impacts people and changes lives. Today, I'm so excited for what you're about to step into, because this man came into my life about 6 months ago. And when he came into my life, it was through a mutual friend, Heather Monahan. And you've had Heather on the show. You've understood her story and where she's come from, and just the greatness of who she is. But something that Heather did so well is steward relationships, steward people in and around you, and help you realize that it's not just about how you can network, but how can you connect? And when you connect to somebody, it no longer becomes about you, but it becomes about the person that you've yet to meet. Think about that for a second. When you truly connect with somebody, it has nothing to do about you. It has nothing to do about the other person. That's what networking has gotten it wrong. It has to do with the person that you both have yet to meet. And that's what Scott has done so well. That's why I love Scott so much, because since meeting Scott, he's very graciously, very humbly connected me with tens and tens of people. And that right there comes from his state of abundance, comes from his state of willing to live life like it's the last day, and being willing to steward every single thing that's come through him. This guy has developed more things in his life than I think I will ever even be able to actually remember. But the fact that he lives life differently, the fact that he's built businesses, the fact that he's got a network that is bigger than any other person that I've ever met in my life that I can call a friend, the fact that he has a Rolodex that he can reach out to of billionaires, of athletes, of coaches, of well-esteemed people that will call him back and pick up his phone call, not because of what he is able to provide them, but because of who he is. That is why I am excited to bring him on the show. And that is why I'm excited to get you exposed to him, because this man is a mountain mover. This man is an outlier. And this man is the host of the Outlier Project, Scott McGregor.
That is one heck of an introduction. Man, I can't wait to listen to that again. I'm like, wow, he's talking about me?
Scott, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. And I know I'll tell a story here. My calendar is very full. And earlier this week, I had a meeting on, and it said Scott McGregor. And I was like, man, Scott and I just talked last week. I know we have a podcast on Friday. What is it that we were scheduled to talk about? And I was like, you know what? I don't even care what we're scheduled to talk about. I'm just going to get on because I want to see the guy's face and I want to be able to talk to him. And so we had a great 30-minute chat about really nothing, but just truly connecting and just developing that relationship. So, man, I love you. I love the way that you show up, the way you serve people, and just thank you for blessing us with the time that you're going to spend with us today.
I'm excited to be here. A huge thank you to Heather for just an incredible introduction, because in the short 6 months that we've known each other, your energy, your enthusiasm, everything about you, your integrity, it's just it's infectious. So I'm ready to roll.
I love it. I love it. I appreciate that. And I receive that. Scott, kind of give our audience a little bit of an insight into Scott McGregor, into the life of Scott McGregor as you came up. Because to be honest with you, you look in your background and you've got the Outlier Project sitting over your, to me, your left shoulder, but most likely your right shoulder. You've got 4 books that you've written in accordance to that. You've got an actual movement, a community called the Outlier Project that I just think is so cool in terms of what it stands for, what it's all about, and what your mission is. But it didn't get to this point that Scott McGregor was like, you know what? I'm going to grow up and I'm going to build something that is different, that is unique, that is all about the outliers. And so talk us through how this experience that you've been through, or the circumstances in life, have ultimately led you to want to build, create, and do something that is so unique in this world.
Yeah. It's a great question. So, I don't want to start at birth, but I'm going to get close. So I grew up poor in a very affluent town. So it was a very strange way to grow up. I stood out like a sore thumb. And it's interesting because later in life, I became the chairman of the board for Elevate New York, which is a curriculum that's embedded in the South Bronx. And what was interesting in that experience was the kids that I was getting to know in the South Bronx, they almost didn't even know they were economically disadvantaged because everybody around them was just like them. That wasn't the case for me. So, and I'm not saying this as like a woe is me, but, I definitely grew up in a very, very humble way. And athletics really leveled the playing field for me. And I realized very early on in life that relationships meant everything. I was a super, super curious kid. And so I would ask all of my friends' parents tons of questions. And I was always fascinated by these levels of success that they had, not for the monetary things, but I was just curious how they got there. And through asking a lot of questions and being curious, I developed relationships with people that were, much, much older than me. And I've carried that through, I guess, my whole life. That's a part of, any success that I've had in life or in business has to do with relationships. It's certainly a huge part of the Outlier Project. But, because of the way I grew up, when my athletic career kind of suddenly came to a screeching halt because of a back injury, I poured all of that hard work, dedication, and resiliency into school and then into my career. And it led to a fair amount of success that I'm incredibly grateful, that I've had and been able to share with other people.
I know you're humble when you talk about your success and what you've been able to do and where you've been able to go. But for the audience, really kind of outline that a little bit for them so that they can really get a feel and an understanding that this is a man that came, as you said, growing up poor in an affluent town, and all of a sudden was able to take every experience, everything that he had gone through, and build relationships that ultimately accumulated to what the world would deem success.
Yeah, I had success right out of the gate, not because of anything other than I had a really good work ethic. It was interesting, my first job I ever had out of college, I sold copiers, which is like, one of the toughest things on the planet to do. And I remember my first week, all the guys on Friday said, "Hey, you're going to go out with us." And I said, well, "What do you mean? Are we cold calling together?" And they laughed and they said, "No, we don't work on Fridays. We typically go to the movies or something." And I'm like, "What?" I said, "No, guys, I need to make money." And, very quickly, I really found a fair level of success just based on work ethic and discipline alone. And I've carried that through and, had left that company, went to a Fortune 500 company, became the youngest national account manager in the history of the company, and then got recruited. I was 29. And I got called by a recruiter and they said, "Hey, this startup is looking for a chief revenue officer." And I thought, "Oh my God, chief revenue officer, I'm 29 years old." So I went to this 5-person company and, there was no sales, there was no marketing, there was no client success. I had to build it from scratch, but I knew that I had a rare opportunity that if it worked, I was probably going to get a lot of credit. And if it didn't work, it's probably not the end of the world. I was only 29. We grew. I was there for 17 years. We grew it from 5 people to 300. And we had double-digit growth every single year for 17 straight years, which in the beginning is super easy. When you're starting to do 30 million and you're continuing to double, have double-digit growth, it becomes a little bit more difficult. And through that experience, I gained enough confidence that I could create my own business. And so 9 years ago, I started a company called Something New. And then a couple of years ago, I started a community called the Outlier Project that I'm wildly passionate about. And so that's a little bit of my career journey.
Guys, I don't want this to be lost on you, because I think when Scott talks about this, he said a few words that really, I think, need to resonate with you, and you need to grasp them out of the air and really absorb them for what they are. He said, "When I was growing up in this poor town, or in this affluent town, I stood out. But what we're called to do and what we desire is to stand out." And so being stood out has this negative connotation. I stood out like a sore thumb. But rather, no, I stand out because I choose to be different. I choose to be excellent. I choose to have a standard that's elevated above anybody else. And that's what got Scott to elevate himself. You want to be different in this world? Choose to be excellent at something. Choose to be world class at something. That is so rare these days. And it doesn't mean that you need to have an extraordinary talent. It could mean that you have an excellent work ethic. It could mean that you have a world-class attitude. It could be that you are a world-class friend. It could be that you are a world-class creative, a world-class artist, a world-class communicator. Whatever that is, hone that craft and become world-class at something, because that immediately will help you stand out from a situation where before you may have stood out. And so I want you to really absorb that, feel that, know that, because that's what Scott was able to do that ultimately brought him to that level of giftedness. Now, Scott, as we kind of go through that, it's an amazing journey of moving through. And as you started Something New, and then as you started the Outlier Project, there was obviously this transitional period where you're like, hey, you know what? I've found this journey. I've gotten to this place. But what was this transition that said, hey, you know what? I'm going to go and start something new. I'm going to go and I'm going to do something different, something that is maybe for you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe more purpose-driven, maybe more mission-driven, maybe more fulfilling in some way, shape, or form. But talk us through that, and what was the moment, or the defining moment, or kind of the catalyst to leaning into that direction?
Yeah, it's so I had the idea for my business, Something New, 10 years before I started it, which is kind of embarrassing. But honestly, I was making more money than I had ever thought I would make in my life. And I thought, I had 2 kids, and I thought it seemed incredibly irresponsible to go do my own thing, just because that's what I wanted to do. Luckily, after sitting on a business plan for 10 years, my wife, Meg, was like, listen, Scott, this is all you think about, talk about, work on in your spare time. Why don't you go for it? Because I believe in you. And that nudge or kick really got me to dive off the cliff and start my business, Something New, which is a talent strategy business, all predicated on my thought that I could build a different mousetrap, because I was very frustrated with what I was dealing with the typical recruiting world. I thought it was very antiquated and very dysfunctional. And, when I started that business, there were a few things that were important to me. One was giving back, and it was incredibly important. I had a major problem, though. I knew I was going to bootstrap the business because I'm a little bit of a control freak, so I did not want to take outside funding, and I didn't want to give up any of that control. So I'm like, oh boy, what am I going to do? I'm literally putting every dollar I make back into the business. And I sat back and I thought, what are my assets? And my assets were these incredible relationships that I had built over decades. And I thought, okay, how do I leverage that asset to give back? And it hit me that if I asked all these remarkable people to write a chapter of gratitude for a life lesson learned, I could put it in a book, and then I could give all of the proceeds to charity. So I asked Coach Dick Vermeil, who won a Super Bowl with the Rams and is now in the Football Hall of Fame, if he would write the foreword. And I asked Tiki Barber, who is a good friend of mine, who's an all-time great with the New York Giants, if he would write the cover quote. And then I asked friends like Jesse Itzler and Heather Monahan if they would write chapters of gratitude. They all did. And that was the first book, Standing O. And 100% of the proceeds went to charity. And then I realized I probably have another 52 friends. Why don't I do it again? That became Standing O Encore. And then I have a soft spot for the military. Both of my boys served in the military. So I wrote a book called Standing O Salute, which was all military people. And we gave all of the proceeds to the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. And then we came out with Standing O Tribute. And then we've got Standing O Honor coming out this year. So it's been my way of uniquely giving back and leveraging those relationships that I built, and to try to do something good in the world.
It's so awesome. I love it. Where can people get copies of those books? Where can they find those?
You can find them on Amazon. So they're all on Amazon. And again, all the proceeds go to charity. I think, I'm a terrible bookseller. I'm maybe the world's worst bookseller. So I'm not great at selling books. But what I've realized is that because of the tens of millions of collective followers from the 200 contributing authors of these books, because they're anthologies, that, there's a huge spotlight that we can shine on these organizations. And I always say nobody gives money to an organization that they don't know about. So I think that's a part of the mission of these books, the Standing O series, is to shine a spotlight so that other people recognize who they are and then maybe resonate with their mission and decide to donate a lot more money than they're going to get from me from the sales of the books.
So powerful. I love it. And I picked up a copy of Standing O, really just to be able to lean in and be able to understand a little bit more about you and kind of what's there. And guys, I just encourage you to go and get a copy of these because they're so unique and they're so cool, and very inspiring just to have a really unique aspect with what it is that's actually going on within this network that Scott's created, but also the messages that each and every person puts in there just really changes your perspective on how you're living and how you're doing things, and literally talks about what a life in ownership looks like 52 times over the course of these different books. So it's standing O, salute, standing out, honor, standing salute, tribute, and standing salute, encore. Just really amazing. And when we kind of dive back into this, there's another thing that I don't want you guys to miss out on here. He had the idea for his business 10 years before he started it. But it was only the relationship with his wife, that ultimately was able to give him the nudge to lean in and start. And so every listener out there right now, I want you to think about anything positive in your life, anything great in your life. And I want you to track it back to what relationship helped make it happen. I've done this exercise 4 or 5 times. 4 or 5 times. Anytime something great happens, I'm like, man, I'm so good. Man, I am so awesome. Man, this was so great. But in actuality, it has nothing to do about you. Has nothing to do about how good you are, has nothing to do about how great you are, has nothing to do about how smart you are, has nothing to do about how capable you are. It has everything to do with, number 1, God's grace on your life. And number 2, the great relationships that you built somewhere, whether it was intentionally or unintentionally. And I'm here today to tell you that the more excellent that you become at building relationships, the easier and more impactful your life will become, because you will be able to reach more people. You'll be able to impact more people. And it starts with relationships. And Scott has become an absolute magician at that. And not because he's any more talented, any more gifted, any more anointed than you or I. It's simply because he's chosen to become world-class at something. And so that is the same thing that's available to you. Scott, I want to dive into really kind of like your mantra of like how you show up in life, treating every single day like it could be your last. And a lot of people talk about this. A lot of people say that, but there's really no meaning to it. There's no like guts to it. It's like, okay, why would that mean anything to you? And I'd love for you, I know you don't usually talk about this on podcasts. We talked about this before we started, that you would be willing to share and kind of lean into this, but talk a little bit about your journey in developing this mindset and the way that you approach life and the way that you think about life in a very unique way that I think is an absolute blessing.
Yep.
But I'd love for you just to fill in the audience a little bit about why you lean in this way and why you have this mindset and why you have this life construct and what it's done for you in being able to show up differently.
I mean, I definitely understand my purpose in life. At the end of the day, no one's going to care about the companies I started. No one's going to care about the books I wrote. People aren't going to care about the house I live in. They're not going to care about the car I drive. They're going to care about the impact that I make. And so that dash between the dates has got to be meaningful. And I am absolutely determined not to sleepwalk through life. So I live every day with a tremendous amount of urgency. And there's a reason for that. I think part of it is I'm a little wired that way, but I had something pretty significant happen to me when I was 40 years old. So I'm 56. So this is 16 years ago. This is a little bit of a crazy story. So 16 years ago, I was really sick, super high fever, and swine flu was going around. But I was really sick, super high fever, like 104 or something like that. So I went to the kind of walk-in emergency room, and they very quickly diagnosed me with swine flu, and they said, that's what you got. And they were about to discharge me. And right before they did, I said, I've got this little bit of a pain in my pec. And I said, I think it's just from a workout. And they said, well, let's do an EKG. And they did. And the doctor came back and he said, I saw this small little spike and I'm not really sure what it is. I've never seen it before, but I think I remember it from when I was in med school. But I'm not really sure what it is. Luckily, one of the top electrophysiologists in the world was at Yale, Mark Marab. So they said, why don't you schedule an appointment with Mark Marab? And I did. He ran some tests and he said, Scott, it's a miracle, an absolute miracle that doctor recognized that as being anything, because this is something doctors never see. Even people in my profession wouldn't necessarily know what this is. And he said, brace yourself, because you have something called Brugada syndrome. And I'm going to tell you something now because I know you're going to go home and Google it. So the other name for Brugada syndrome is SUDS, and it stands for sudden unexpected death syndrome. Wow. So it's a condition, and I think probably a lot of people can relate to this. You hear about somebody, young person, super healthy, maybe athletic, and all of a sudden they drop dead. And people are like, oh my God, can you believe that, Bobby or Sally died so unexpectedly? And they think that a lot of those people may have had Brugada syndrome, but the problem is that it has no symptoms. And the only symptom is death.
Wow.
So it has no symptoms and it has no cure. The only thing you can do is get a defibrillator implanted in your chest with wires that go to your heart so that if you do have an episode, it will hopefully save your life and shock you back to health or back to life. So it really crystallized to me in that moment and in those days that preceded that diagnosis. It's what we all know. Justin, we all know tomorrow is not promised, that today might be all that we have. I have a hunk of metal sitting in my chest that reminds me every single day that there's no such thing as a special occasion. Every moment is a special occasion. So I don't believe in holding back on anything. I think, pop the champagne, break out the good china, start the business you want to start, tell people you appreciate them, tell people that you love them, do the things that you want to do with the people you want to do them with, because every minute and every moment is a special occasion. I remember Googling once special occasion, and it said it means an important day. And I thought, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Isn't every single day an important day? So I live every day with an insane sense of urgency. I want to leave a positive impact on the world. The bigger, the better. But I go into every day with a lot of intention and a lot of purpose to make sure that I do that and I fulfill that. And it doesn't need to be, a certain number. Like there's a lot of people that say, I want to positively impact 1 billion people. And I think that's fine, but I think sometimes that's just a vanity number. That's a kind of a vanity metrics. And I don't know whether it's truly meaningful. I absolutely believe there's a ripple effect. So if I can have a positive impact on one person, I know it will trickle over into others. So that diagnosis 16 years ago certainly changed my life to a degree. And it's something that I live with every day, knowing that I don't really know even what the next couple minutes, could bring. It changes your perspective on how you live life.
Scott, it's simply amazing. And I think something that just hits me every time you tell me this story and we talk about this is what gets you to move from a state of potential fear or a state of potential confusion and overwhelm that could hit you and hinder you every single day. But what gets you to move from that state to that state of love, to that state of action, to that state of appreciation for every single day and really wanting to make a massive change and impact in everybody's life?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it has to do with faith, and a part of it has to do with, I think you've got, two choices. When you face adversity, I truly believe adversity is a gift. And I think when you face adversity, yeah, I could, curl up in a ball in the fetal position and suck my thumb. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be a victim. I'm not a victim. I've lived an extraordinary life, and despite incredible adversity, way beyond just what I just described to everybody, but I'm never going to view myself as a victim. I have a great opportunity every breath I take. I've got an opportunity to do something good, and I'm going to try to maximize that. So it's just a mindset. I don't dwell on it. I view it as a gift. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that adversity. Hopefully I've been able to, turn it into something really positive.
For somebody who's out there, who's listening to this and is maybe suffering from some type of circumstance, some type of situation, some type of wall that they seem to have run into, an obstacle they have to overcome, and are maybe experiencing a little bit more fear than they're used to, or maybe having a hard time starting or changing their perspective or their mindset. What is something that you would like offer them in terms of encouragement, in terms of strategies that they could do to maybe lean into something that you've been able to overcome and do?
I mean, when in doubt, I take action. Like, I think you have to take action. You can never sit back and ruminate or wallow in anything. I think the antidote to a lot of our issues is just taking action. So, I don't feel like getting on the treadmill every single morning, but I am going to absolutely put my sneakers on every single day. And even on those days when I'm like, there is no way I'm going to do, 5 miles today, I put my sneakers on, and guess what? I couldn't tell you the last time I didn't do 5 miles. There's a magic in just taking action. And I take action because I feel that sense of urgency, because I just don't know.
Yeah.
And I will never know. None of us are ever going to really know when it's going to be over. But I've got kind of that reminder right here. I can feel it in my chest. I just take action, and action is a great anecdote for me.
It's so funny the way that you explain that, in terms of none of us know when it's the last moment. None of us know when it's there. But the fact that we maybe choose not to have the awareness, we choose not to lean into the understanding, we choose to look and then look away and just be like, oh, that's too scary over there, I'm just going to continue to stay on a status quo. It's really, I think, inspiring to think about living every day like it's a moment to celebrate. Everything that happens is a moment to acknowledge. Everything that happens is a moment to be grateful for and appreciate. And I think your book, Standing O, and Standing O Encore and everything that you're doing there really starts to highlight that. It's that space of gratitude. It's that space of, why are you living this way? Why are you excited for where you're at? No matter whether your circumstances are negative or no matter whether your circumstances are positive, there is something to be grateful for. You get the opportunity to play the game. You get the chance to live another day. You get the chance to have your feet on the ground, put your shoes on, and go after it and play the game of life. And I think if we actually start to think back to that, and take that in and of itself is a life of ownership. That in and of a life itself is different. That in and of itself is a mindset that will put you on the trajectory to be excellent at something, to have an impact, to truly change something. Because we have to realize that whatever it is that's in your creative space, whatever it is, that whatever idea that maybe you've had for 10 years that you haven't started, that thing that you haven't started, realize is somebody else's miracle that they're waiting for. Realize that something that you have ultimately been called to, something that you have maybe had in the back of your mind, that's somebody else's miracle. That's what they're waiting for. And you have been created for that exact thing today. And so going and getting after it and being grateful for where you're at, being grateful for the circumstance you're in, being grateful for the situation you're in, allows you to step in and celebrate that, because that is the journey that you're on, which is super, super exciting. And what a blessing that we get to do this together.
It's, life is a lot of fun. And every day I wake up, I thank God for another opportunity, to do cool things with cool people. And this is one of them. I've been looking forward to this all day, because I try to always be very present and be where my feet are. And this is where I want to be right now at this moment, is talking to you. And hopefully, maybe this message is going to be meaningful to somebody that listens. And, that's that impact that I'm after every single day. So I appreciate the opportunity to chat and have this discussion.
It's so beautiful. I love it. And is there anything specific that you do, Scott, that helps you keep that level of awareness? I know Jesse talks a lot about his big ass calendar and putting things on the calendar that are you talk about doing fun things with friends, with people you enjoy, and he puts 2 to 3 things on the calendar every year that are really like mark that year and just say, hey, this is really cool and really exciting. Is there anything that you kind of have created systems around or intentionalities around that that maybe establish some level of framework that would be something that you could think about, that our audience listeners could think about?
Yeah, I mean, I think of that concept of a misogi, which is, put something on your calendar that's really, really hard and really maybe a little bit scary. So, that for me has been things like 29029, which is, climbing the equivalent of Mount Everest in 36 hours. It's things like Colin O'Brady's 12-hour walk, which is disconnect yourself from everything and go for a 12-hour walk and just be in your head. I've been to Joe DeSena, who's the founder and CEO of Spartan. I've been to his house in Vermont and done, climbs up his mountain, Mount Sparta. So those things that seem really daunting, those are the things that I like to do. So I try to put those on my calendar, and, I just try to make sure that I surround myself with people that are 10 steps ahead of me, and people that keep me humble, keep me motivated, keep me inspired. And that's why, new friends like yourself or friends that I've had for a long time, like Heather or Jesse, are so important to me, because you're all doing such amazing things. It just it lights the fire under me every single day.
I love it. I appreciate you. And like I said, I receive that, and I feel the same for you. It's why I think we hit our relationship off so well at the get-go, and it's just so exciting to continue to keep developing it. For somebody who lives in ownership so well, for somebody who lives in this space, how would you define ownership in a word or a phrase?
Ownership is you have to accept whatever circumstance you're in and never play the victim. So you're never a victim. I have I don't know, maybe a mental thing that I do is that regardless of the circumstance or the adversity that I'm going through, I always think, what would that line look like that would be behind me that would want to take my place? And at my lowest low, at the times when you think it cannot possibly get worse than this, I know that line is so long, I would never be able to see the end of it. So, that mental framework just always makes me think I'm not a victim. And I need to own whatever I'm in. I need to take responsibility for wherever I'm at, and I need to own it. And I need to do something about it. Nobody's coming to rescue me. I've got to rescue myself. And I hope that answers the question, but that's kind of the first thing that popped into my head.
It's so great. You and everybody else have been created for such a time as this. And everything that you're going through, everything that you're experiencing, you're fully equipped in order to have a massive impact and a massive influence on whatever it is that's going on around you. Scott, I'd love for you to just give some people some insight as to what the Outlier Project is, where people can join it, where they can get a part of it, where they can find you, and engage with you in a little bit of a deeper way if they so choose.
Yeah, I appreciate it. The Outlier Project is, it's 700 members and growing very quickly in 34 different countries. If you want to find out more about it, you can go to theoutlierproject.co, not .com, .co. And you can see we have 200 live virtual interactive events a year. We have 12 in-person meetups, including in 2 weeks, I'll be in Nicaragua to help build a library for one of our members that runs a nonprofit called Rayo de Sol. And we do a ton of really fun things together as a community. Kentucky Derby, Army-Navy game, you name it. So it's the most professional fun I've ever had in my life in 30 years of business. I would love people to join, and that's really the place to go. If you want to connect with me, LinkedIn is really my platform of choice. You can find me on Instagram too, but I have not cracked the code on Instagram. So I'm Scott McGregor _official on Instagram, but find me on LinkedIn, shoot me a note, and I'd love to get to know you and be connected.
Guys, I really encourage you to lean into that. I mean, when you sit and you listen to what Scott talks about, building relationships, doing fun things with people that you like, the Outlier Project is such a great way in which to do that, in which to engage in something new, something unique, something different, and being able to just be a part of a community that is putting extraordinary things on the calendar, but also doing extraordinary work and making an extraordinary impact is all checking boxes and making moments to celebrate every day along the year. So I really encourage you to connect with Scott and lean into that, because as we've talked about on this podcast, it's not just about being able to stand in, but how do you stand out? How do you stand out? How do you become excellent at something? How do you build relationships that are unique? How do you build relationships that ultimately are not here to serve you, are not here to serve the other person, but are here to serve the person you've yet to meet? When you build relationships that way, when you foster relationships that way, you don't go in as transactional relationships. You go in as authentic relationships. You go into relationships that now can have an impact, now can change not just a moment in time, not just a year, not just a life, but a generation. That is how you have the impact, is when you go in and you build relationships that are not about you or not about the other person, but the person that you've yet to meet. Because if you think back to any time in your life, anything positive that's happened has become because of somebody else, has become because of a relationship that you have. And Scott is a living testimony of this. Somebody who celebrates every single day and circumstance he's under, not because of the situation he's found himself in, but because truly every day is a gift. Every day is a moment. Every day is an opportunity to serve somebody else, to steward the gifts that you've been given. And what a blessing that we get to have the awareness of that by waking up every single day. Because when we act that way, when we behave that way, that is what gets us different outcomes. That is truly different. And what do we say on here? Success is different. So own your different. And we'll see you guys next week.